Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and we're having another Tuesday Stroke Buddies Stroke Survivors Support Group meeting. I always feel good when I get that out without any mistakes. It's a mouthful. We do this every Tuesday, obviously, from 11 to 12 or however long it goes. And what we normally do is try and bring scientists and physical therapists, doctors, people like that, uh, in and talk about real recovery information. It's not that I don't have real recovery information. I just prefer to confirm what I think I know with other people and bring real science and such to the group. But today we don't have a guest, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I know about shoulders. So, shoulders. Okay. Boy, that was the biggest problem for me. It took me a year and a half, not a year and a half, 15 months to get my shoulder back. Actually, it was coming back at about a year. I stopped at 15 months and started doing functional therapy. Therapy's all around you. I say I got tired of pulling on rubber bands because I was doing 8-10 hours of therapy a day for literally for 15 months. So my shoulder was the worst thing for me. Walking in my hand came back first. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it's odd that your hand comes back for your shoulder. Not that odd, but it's not what they say in the book, Billy.
Yep.
When they get out the book, it says starts with your shoulder, goes to your arm and elbow, wrist, and hand. But may as well get this out of the way since we're on this subject, and that is I couldn't lift my hand off my lap. I couldn't raise it at all because my shoulder wouldn't work. I could wiggle my fingers at that point if I picked my arm up by my sleeve and flipped it over, and I could kind of started wiggling my fingers, but I had nothing up here. So obviously the first question that anybody who's sitting in a wheelchair with their hand in their lap like I was um, how do I get this darn thing going? Because I'm trying to lift it off my lap and nothing's happening. I had no, and most people have no to very little connection between their brain and their shoulder. Um, the only thing, one thing is a lot of times, especially early on, I don't yawn. I don't do this that much anymore, but ever. But the first 6 months or so, I would yawn, and that affected arm would go like right up to the sky, and then it would come right back down. And then I would try and move it, and I could grunt as hard as I wanted and try and move it as much as I wanted, and it wouldn't go. That's because this is basically a reflex. I've had doctors tell me it's a reflex. I've had doctors tell me they don't really know any way that you can harness it because it's not the type of movement or connection that you want. I had one person in one of the groups when I post this numerous times say that they had harnessed it, but they never really gave me a satisfactory explanation. That's like 1 out of 100. Everybody else said, yeah, it happened to me too, and I couldn't do anything with it. So the one thing you can do with it, however, is you can tell your little brain that there's nothing wrong with your shoulder, because if it can work on a reflex, once you get the connection going, it you might be able to move it voluntarily. That was a big deal for me at the time because I was only a couple months out when I found that out. And, I was worried. I didn't understand anything about neuroplasticity or connections. Somebody told me to stare at my fingers and try and move them. And I mean, I was picking up little bits and pieces, but I didn't know enough to put all this kind of stuff together. Um, so, Gosh, I was going to start on how to get your shoulder moving, and we got off on that. Anyway, so if you're sitting in a wheelchair, how do you get your shoulder moving? Well, if you're actually sitting in a wheelchair, there's one simple one you can do. You put your well, of course, now I've raised it up, haven't I, to put my hand under it. That's so you can see on the screen. Okay, so you would grab it by the shirt sleeve and put it somewhere on the arm of the wheelchair, and then put your hand under it, and then you can raise it up. Let's see. If you do this, you have to be above the bones. You got two bones here, like your funny bone, or your, as I call it, your not so funny bone, because you only get to hit it about 1,000 times before it turns from your funny bone to your not funny anymore bone, and the one on the inside. So you have to be above them so your hand doesn't slip around. I tried to teach this to somebody, a couple of people, and they grab it down here, and all they're doing is bending their elbow. I'm not saying that's bad, because you have to bend your elbow, but if you want to bend your elbow, you should actually be doing elbow straightening. We'll get to that in just a second. Um, so if, that's one thing you can do. You can raise it with your other hand. Passive motion is always a good thing to do because it's motion of some sort. Now, of course, the point is to try and make a connection between your brain and whatever you're working on. In this case, your shoulder. So you'll hear me say this until the day they haul me away and stick me in the ground, that when you do passive motion, you need to be trying to think about it about your brain. This is counterintuitive to most people. I can tell you that when I even put it in my hand video, opening your hand, when they told me to stare at my hand and see if I could move it, yeah, I thought what you thought the first time you heard that. Okay, sure, sure, what's that gonna do? Okay. And as I say in my video, well, I didn't have a better plan. In fact, I didn't have a plan at all. So I listened to him. Anyway, the point is, after a while, I got a little tiny bit of movement. They all got excited. I went like, I'm moving my fingers like a 16th of an inch. But the point is that it was voluntary. I could repeat it. It was only a teeny little wiggle, a little flicker of movement, as they're sometimes called. But I was able to build on it. So anytime you're doing anything passive, you want to think about it at the same time. You want to think, okay, lift, that shoulder. I don't know how to tell you how to think about it. I sometimes said it out loud like that, lift that shoulder, whatever. I definitely tried to think about it, move that shoulder, up, whatever works for you. Okay, so that's one you can do in a wheelchair. Some people can't get out of bed or have trouble transferring or need somebody else to transfer to a wheelchair. Yeah, most people don't spend all day in bed, but some do. Anyway, there are some things that you can do to get your shoulder going in bed, and you can also do some on land that essentially remove gravity or even use gravity to help you get some motion. So when I promoted, I hate to use the word advertise, when I promoted this meeting, Bob Anderson went on and put a video about him raising his arm, laying in bed. He was talking about anti-gravity. In a sense it is. The real anti-gravity move is making snow angels, or anything where you just drag the arm on the bed without lifting it up, because lifting it up takes some connection and some effort and eventually some strength. I know when I started lifting mine up, well, I finally got it to about even. I'll talk about going above level because it uses a different set of muscles. Um, so there are a number of things that you can do in the bed to I'll try and find some. I have videos on some of this stuff. I've not made one on bed exercises because I didn't do them. I was real concerned about walking again and standing up. I've always been good at doing squats and standing up, so I worked right away on standing up. I could stand up out of the wheelchair. Well, they had me practice walking a day or two after I got to the rehab hospital. So within a week, I was standing up and well, I don't know if you'd call it walking. She had me on a gait belt and I was dragging my foot and scared to death and every other thing. But I didn't do a lot of bed exercises because I wanted to get out of bed. Some people aren't able to. Did I have a mild stroke or whatever? I don't believe in rating strokes. I think it's a really bad idea. They all suck. And let's just leave it at that. So, but one thing I did do right away, I'd broken a shoulder in a triathlon accident. And I don't know where I first discovered them, heard about them, made them up, whatever. But in order to heal that, I started doing what I call circles. Basically, you're standing up. You could, I guess you could take the arm out of the wheelchair. You're standing up and you're trying to draw a circle with your index finger. That makes you go round and round. In the beginning, they're going to be triangles, and you're going to go past it, and they're going to be real jerky like that. Ooh, I shouldn't be doing that because I got right back into jerky. And next thing you know, I'll be doing something this afternoon, and my arm will be jerky. I find it's never a good idea to show people what's going on with your bad side. Bad, I use the word bad. I never do that. With your affected side, with the healing side. So Sophia asked a question recently, I sent her the circles video and I told her that they were a variation of the pendulum. And I tried to explain the pendulum. I don't think I did a very good job. Basically, you're standing up again and you can hold on to a table or something. And you can move your body. You can let your arm droop and move your body, and your arm will swing as a result of your motion. So you can use motion in another part of your body to get that shoulder movement. Now, all you're doing is, swinging it back and forth. But I knew all along that circles was a outgrowth of the pendulum. But in looking for videos, I found one for Sophia that showed you how to do the transition, which is really great. I'm going to put a bunch of videos in the description under this video when I put it on YouTube, and that'll be one of them, along with several of mine. So that's one thing I did. The other thing I did was one of the things you can do is you can either use, I was going to get my dowels and stuff here. They're out in the garage. I got jammed and didn't do a couple of things I wanted to do. Anyhow, you can use a dowel once you can grab. I had to work on being able to hold on to stuff. I practiced holding on to the mail every day. It's funny because yesterday I got the mail and I was walking back to the house and I realized I still carry the mail in my affected hand. 14 years later, I'm not even thinking about it. I did it for 6 months. I just trained my brain to stick it over there. I did that to learn how to hold on, to learn opposition, get your thumb working against your other fingers, because that's exactly what you do when you hold in the mail. So once I got a little bit of grip strength, I could hold on to a dowel. I could hold on to 1 inch, inch and a half diameter dowel. This is a salt, and then you can take the other end of the dowel and you can push up. Once I got level, I had a lot of trouble. I'll get into that. Well, I may as well get into it now rather than jump around and not remember it or not come back to it. The reason for that is I've noticed this with almost everybody, not almost, with everybody I've worked with. Would get them up to like right about here. Now I could raise it above there and they would say, no pain. And one thing I did, if you have somebody else, this is a good trick. I've done it with 3 or 4 people and it works. Yeah, it has a limit. Okay, so I was working with this one guy. Everything's backwards, Ralph. I was working with this one guy and he could raise his arm to about here and he ran out of juice. He couldn't even quite get it to a level. Well, I'd take it like right here and just touch it, and I'd bring it up. And I'd say, hold it, hold it, hold it, and I'd let go. And it would come back down, but it wouldn't come back down to where it was. I'd raise it to here, and it'd come back down to here, not all the way back down to here. So now it's here. Now I raise it again. Okay, and I hold it there, and I tell him, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Well, I take mine away, and it drifts back down. Now it's up another tick. Typically, when you go the third time, or certainly by the fourth time, it won't work anymore because you're getting out of the strength zone that the person has. But what I did with that person was I did it, I went over to his house twice a week and did physical therapy with him and on him. And after a couple months, we got him to where he wasn't quite to, where I am, straight up and making a gun. But at the same time, that's full extension. But he got to where he could literally raise his arm, uh, about that high, getting there, above the above level. If you, I think your pectoral muscles and some others. I'm not a physical therapist. I really should go to a local college and take a anatomy course. But I'm terrible with Latin names, and they teach you everything in Latin.
Mhm.
I know this for a fact because of butterflies and flowers. I can remember some of them, but I have a hard time with names and words more than numbers. Anyway, you have muscles that lift your arm to about here. If you put your hand, if you have somebody, you could take your good hand and put it on somebody's scapula on the bone back there, and they have them raise their handle here. You won't feel anything. If you can feel it in the muscles if you touch the muscles, but if you put your hand on the scapula, you won't feel anything. If they haven't had a stroke, so they can have full range of motion. Once they get above level and start going up here, you'll notice that scapula is rotating. Well, that rotation, I gotta think, takes different muscles. So to me, that's why there's a stumbling block. I need to confirm that with a couple of physical therapists. I like to confirm everything I tell anybody so that I know that I'm passing out good information. I'm pretty sure that's why. I mean, I can feel it. I noticed it on myself, and then I got somebody to do it and put my hand on it. I definitely could tell. I do a lot of things by observation. So jumping around again. Okay, so we're talking about a dowel. So that's a passive way of getting that arm up. Again, when I pushed it up, I would think up, 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 up. Well, once I got some voluntary movement, once you get some voluntary movement, if you can move it to here and you're pushing it up past there, that thinking about it is a lot easier because you're thinking about it, move, 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 up, up, up. Oh, I'm stuck. Okay, push it up, keep pulling, 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 keep pulling with your brain. Keep trying to make that connection. I found it a lot easier once I had some motion. The more motion I got, the easier it was to do uh, the thinking about it. It's called visual imagery, or uh, because you're visualizing yourself doing it, and it actually does work. It's how I got my hand going again. And so, one other trick that you can do to do that is oh, Sophia, I just realized one thing I never did send you was the thing about the pulley. I was going to set up a shot in my house and show you how to do it with a door. Okay, so one thing you can do is you can take a piece of rope and you can tie a loop in it. You can put your hand through the loop even if you can't grab something. You can put the loop around you. Typically, you go up over something. A pulley makes it easier, but it's not necessary, absolutely necessary. I've got a rig out in my garage to go. I put some boards up overhead just for physical therapy stuff. And I attach a pulley up there, and I got a little rope. And you can, even if you have almost no movement, you can put the loop in front of you, raise your hand, put it in through the loop. I made the loop big enough to demonstrate that, although, I mean, I can grab it and put it in, but I'm always thinking about, well, what if you can't move your hand? What if you can't do this? What if you can't do that? Because in all the videos I've made, when I didn't think about that, I had other stroke survivors come back to me and say, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. So it was always taking it back a step or two. So now I try and think about going back a step or two, before I talk or before I make a video. Anyway, there's other ways of achieving that. Let's see. I've seen somebody with a door loop, a door anchor. That's something with a lump on one side and a loop on the other. You put through the door, you shut the door, you can't pull it through. The thickness of the nylon's about enough to keep it from going up and down in the door. It doesn't spring the door, but it wedges in there pretty good and doesn't go up and down. So I saw somebody with just a loop and they just put a rope through and went like that. No pulley. I've also seen people do that with one of those stretch belts. Some of them have, the round ones particularly, sometimes have two handles on them. So I've seen people feed it through the loop. Of course, you have to sometimes push the handle down and go in sideways because the piece of hard plastic might be bigger than the loop. Anyway, you get it in there and then you got two grips. You can also add a pulley inside. Anything that'll get it up and allow you to pull that arm up. Now, one thing in both the dowel, this is a big, big, big disclaimer in both the dowel and the pulley. If they're telling you you have a sublux shoulder or frozen shoulder, you need to talk to your physical therapist or your orthopedist or your primary care physician about doing this at all. And most of them, if you're not too bad, most of them will say, okay, and they'll tell you what I'm about to tell you, which is stay out of the pain zone, okay? When I got to here, when I could push it up, but it started to hurt. I could push it up with a dowel, but at some point, when I first started, it started hurting here. As I got to where I could raise it here on my own, it started hurting above that. That pain zone kept moving up and up and up. It took it took almost a year for it to go away. The last few months, what I was working on was not pain, but I could push the dowel all the way up. What I started doing was pushing it up, pulling the dowel up as far as I could and then pushing and thinking about it. Pulling the dowel up, pushing and thinking about it. I was working always on getting the amount of voluntary motion that I was able to achieve with the dowel or the pulley voluntarily. Because ultimately, I didn't want to walk around with a dowel to raise my arm for the rest of my life. Yeah, I know, I'm being so.
Puppet.
Yeah, you go in the grocery store, you need the pasta off the top shelf. You get out your dowel, you go up and, I'm holding onto the dowel. How do I grab the pasta? You can't. Anyway, so it's not practical to walk around with a dowel for the rest of your life. And who wants to? The point is recovering. So that was. It took me 6 or 9 months before I got out of the pain zone. And I didn't write all this down. I was busy recovering. I didn't know I was going to be doing this either. If I knew I was going to be here today, I might have taken better notes back then. I'm the video guy who didn't start videotaping himself till I was 8 years in. Yeah, I don't know why, but I didn't. So, the disclaimer is stay out of the pain zone. Now, there's such a thing as acceptable pain. I won't use the word good pain because I don't think there's anything good about any pain. Well, pain is a good in the sense it's a warning system. It's telling you stop. So that's the disclaimer. Stop. Now, I did get into like a slight discomfort zone because that's where I was working to go up. You're not going to keep going up if you don't push it just a little bit, but you have to learn the difference between real pain that does damage and any kind of acceptable pain. People are sitting there going, well, how do I do that? It's really not all that difficult because, when I was here, I could push up a little bit without getting too much. So I put too much pain. If I kept pushing, I got pain. So I just worked between where I could raise it and pushed up from there till I hit the pain and then came back down and just did that over and over and over again. You can't see me, but I'm pushing with my other hand on the dowel. This would also be true. I also did it without the dowel sometimes. I'd push up and try and get more range of motion. Then when I was done with the dowel, I'd go back to seeing how high I could raise it. If I had been really smart, I would have paid attention to what I could do in the very beginning, done the dowel and see if I could raise it higher, and then I would know that it was a benefit. I know it was a benefit in the sense that I kept seeing progress no matter how small it was, and that's a good thing to be able to measure, because if you can see small increments of progress and note them for yourself, that's real motivating. Because you kind of makes you feel like or made me feel like I was kind of like on the right track. It was motivating. I kept doing it. I kept seeing results. You've heard me say this 1,000 times. Success builds on success. So set small goals. I knew I was having a big problem with my shoulder. I didn't say I'm going to dunk a basketball with my left hand, in 6 weeks, because there's no way that was going to happen ever, let alone in 6 weeks. So don't set yourself up for failure. I had somebody I coached yesterday say I walked 173 steps today. It was yesterday, she told me, without my cane today. And I said, we were talking about this concept of setting small goals, achievable goals. I did them every day. Almost every day. So I said, well, you know what your goal is for tomorrow? And she said, no. Of course she said no. It's kind of like a thing I do as setup. I said, well, it's to see if you can do 173 again. Your goal for tomorrow is not 200 steps, especially if 173 is your new, personal best. In fact, if I had a personal best of 173 and the next day I did 165, but a week ago I was to do 150, I wouldn't beat myself up for doing 165 instead of 173. I'd go, okay, well, we're past 150. We're working on 175. I didn't quite do it today. I did it yesterday. Maybe I can do it tomorrow. So the goal for tomorrow would be not 173, be beat 165. Try and head back to 173. So I think you understand what I'm saying. The story I tell for hyperbole on this is actual true story. Had somebody who was walking pretty, okay for 4 months out on a stroke with a pretty serious drop foot, no bending of the knee, no real ankle flexion, no push off with the toe. And he goes, I'm going to run a 5K in December. And it's like in June, I'm going, no, you're not, dude. I mean, I would never say that to him, but what I ended up saying was, don't set a goal like that, because if you can't make it, you set yourself up for failure. And if you're doing really well, you might be able to make it before that. I knew that wasn't necessarily true, but in his case, but it can be true for other people reading that. And when I comment on somebody's post, I try and comment on what they're talking about. I also try and leave something for everybody else reading it. In fact, sometimes people don't understand that I'm talking to more than one person. They'll say, well, I knew that. And I'll come back and say, well, yeah, that was for everybody else. So like yesterday, when I was talking about snow angels on Bob Anderson's post, I said, Bob, you know this, but for others out there, here's snow angels. So I try and do that a little bit. Okay, So we talked about pushing up. Okay, what are some other things that you can do to get your shoulder going? If you can stand up, one thing that's really good is corner push-ups. You can do them against a wall. They teach you against the corner where your wrists are rotated and you move into the corner. Don't know why. I learned them as corner push-ups. I also did them when I didn't have a corner against a straight flat wall. When I shot the video on it, I haven't edited yet that I ought to and include with this talk. I went back to the corner. Basically, it's fairly safe. You basically stand about arm's distance away from the wall, and you go in and you push back. Now you have to have some movement before you're doing this. All these things that we're going to talk about now are building on the movement that you got started somehow through snow angels, bed exercises, pendulum, circles, pushing up with the dowel. You know, if you're starting to get some movement, voluntary movement, these are some of the things that you can do. And then we're going to go into core, because core comes back into everything, doesn't it? So one of the things some of the things you can do are things like, well, corner push-ups I mentioned. You can do weight bearing on the counter, just simply putting your arms down. Weight bearing on your shoulder is a lot like weight bearing on your affected leg. I don't know why, but I do know it's true that when you stand on your affected leg or you put weight on that affected shoulder, it's sending signals to the brain, obviously. But for some reason, and it's a good thing, the brain interprets those signals as, I want to use that arm, I want to use that leg. So that's why you always hear physical therapists, me, everybody talking about weight bearing. There's several other good things in terms of your leg. You stand there long enough, your heel will come down, stretch the tendons back out, get rid of that pointy down toe stroke thing too. There are a lot of reasons to do weight bearing. But the main reason for me is it tells your brain you want to use it. And that's, I think, is a good thing when you're in the midst of moving it half voluntarily and half with your other hand. I got to think if your brain thinks you want to use it, then when you do that mental imagery, it's got to be more effective. I don't know. Logic would tell you so. I mean, you could do a study on it, but I bet you couldn't even prove it. I mean, how are you going to do a control group? Anyway, so wax on, wax off is another good one. You can do it right there at the counter. You can do wax on, wax off without being able to hang on to the towel or dish towel or whatever. I just use a dish towel. Actually, what I do, I still do it this almost 15 years out. When I clean up my kitchen, I'll actually use the sponge on the counters, a damp sponge, and wipe them all down, clean them all up with my affected hand. Yeah, and I go both ways and do all kinds of therapy cleanups instead of not thinking about it, because I can't not think about moving this hand or it won't move. Before the stroke, none of us thought about moving at all, but as everyone found out when they had a stroke, now you got to think about moving all the damn time. Anyway, it's better than being dead, though. Um, anyway, so you can, without a whole lot of being able to grip, you can do wax on, wax off. So I'll clean it with a sponge with my affected hand, and I'll take the rag and I'll dry it off and with my affected hand also. Okay, let's see, what else can you do? There's lots of things you can do. Okay, we'll demonstrate one. Sitting in a wheelchair, once you start getting shoulder movement back, you can do things like you can try rolling them. You can roll them forward like I'm doing now. You can roll them backwards. What else can you do with them? Oh yeah, scapula pinch. You push your two shoulder blades together. This one's real good. I'm forgetting right now why it's so good, but there's something about moving those. I know because it moves the scapular muscles more than both shrugs. Shrugs are the first thing. So just shrugging your shoulders. And of course, you can try and do one and the other, or do them both together. So you got shrugs, rolls in both directions, and scapular pinch. So those are all good, and they're all available to somebody in a wheelchair. Let's see, what else? So is long lever and short lever. However, both of these are getting up on towards the end of your shoulder recovery because short lever is, let's say, starting here you go. You start with your hands in your lap and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I just blew the coordination on that. They're also very good for coordination because you should go 1 left, 2 right, 3 left, 4 right, 5 left, 5 right, 6 right, 7 left, and I switch sides. So now, and then there's long lever. That's when you go out here. So you start with your hands to your side. You got 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go up a little bit on this. Starting again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, look, that left arm in the right. There you go. Using a mirror in lots of things. 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are really good for not only for movement but also coordination. Coordination's a bit of an issue for some people. I know it was for me. I don't know if it is for everybody, but I've seen some coordination issues and never actually thought about it, checking it out, like studying it like I do some things. Um, but I've definitely seen coordination issues in some of the people that I've worked with live. And uh, one other thing that I did, I'm a big believer in symmetry, and this is also good for coordination. I do it standing. I have a video on this one to call it symmetry. I use a mirror. Uh, Winnie's used a mirror for walking. I use them for symmetry things. You can use them for lots of things if you want to see what you're doing. You know, if you raise your arm in the symmetry, when I first started doing them, I'd look in the mirror and my left arm would be down here. No, it's supposed to be there. And you have to learn how to, so I'm going to close my eyes now and I'll put them back to where they're level. You have to learn that that's proprioception. Proprioception is the ability of knowing where any one of your body parts is in space in real time. Comes in real handy. It's something you definitely want to work on in a number of places. The number one would be in walking. I have a video on foot placement. You really want to know where you're putting that foot without looking. Otherwise, you know, and we all did this for the first number of months when you start walking. What are you doing? You're staring at your big toes. Yeah, you could run right into a building or something because you're looking down here. And you know, I wanted to eventually get back to like looking out there like I did before. In fact, after I got proprioception down, I would walk with my foot. I'd walk and this is twofold. I'd keep my head up, but also walk like looking at mailboxes and stuff. Because before the stroke, you'd walk next to somebody and you wouldn't walk where you're going. You'd look and talk to them. You could walk and talk and not look where you're going at the same time. That'd be nice to do now. Okay, well, it's possible. I can do it. I don't feel comfortable doing it. I'm worried about walking into something. I'm not. I've never have. Whatever. It's just like a leftover stroke brain thing. I don't know about all you, but I got a bunch of leftover stroke brain things where my brain thinks I shouldn't do this or do that because it was very protective in the beginning, and that protection. I've noticed that once I can do something, it takes me sometimes a couple of years for my brain to realize it can do it and adapt my thinking to that, to no longer go, okay, you got to do this, or think that every time you go to do it. So symmetry was I would stand. I suppose you could do it in sitting in a wheelchair, but I would just raise my hands. In the beginning, I'd look down both of them. It's kind of like a yoga move. You turn your head, you're doing Warrior Two, right, Winnie?
Yep.
Look out over that middle finger of the hand, and I would make sure, because like I said, my hand would be down here. I had to learn how to put it here with my eyes closed. Um, so I would check, and there's no order to this. You can come forward. So the first thing's up off your sides. You can go up forward. You can go up like this. Then you can go forward. You can go up like that, back down, back like this. Keep doing that 15 times. Come here, do that some. There's no order. Back down every once in a while. And what you're doing is, well, first of all, you're moving the shoulders. You're also doing something called bilateral therapy. When you use both sides together, there's some signals from the affected side of the brain. Well, there's signals. We generally think after stroke that everything's completely split because you have one side that doesn't work and the opposite side you have a brain injury. Well, actually, um, the unaffected side of your brain sends signals to the affected side that help. It also makes like a little blueprint. Um, you can do stuff like you can pick something up a few times with your unaffected hand, and then when you go to pick it up with your affected hand, you can do it a lot better because you've got this like kind of temporary blueprint. But you're basically, anytime I learned how to roll my fingers again by watching this hand. This hand wouldn't do it. So I said, well, if I do them both together, this hand did a lot better. So I'd do like 5 patterning and then do 1 or 2. And then when it all fell apart, I'd go back to patterning again. And eventually I got to where I could do 5 and 5. Eventually I got to where I could just do it in both directions. Um, it took 2 months, 4 times a day, 10, 15 minutes at a time. So I did an hour a day on it multiple times for about 2 months just to do that one thing. But, why is rolling your fingers important? I don't know. It was important to me. But the main thing was in doing that, I got like all kinds of other movement in terms of my opposition and moving single digits at a time on my affected side. Yeah, I just moved my pinky, my ring finger, my middle finger, and my index finger separately. So you can't measure you can't really measure the value in some bigger exercise in terms of all of other things that it did. Plus, I'm just one of these people, like I got this idea I wanted to roll my fingers, and I just wouldn't give up on it until I could. Um, but that craziness served me well in my recovery. So um, I like symmetry because I didn't know anything much about bilateral therapy. I didn't know what it was called when I started doing it. I knew it was well, actually I went back in and showed it to my PT and OT, and like I said, hey, I figured this out, and they went like, because they knew it was called mirror or bilateral therapy. Anyway, um, I found that symmetry was real important. I found that using my unaffected side to help my affected side was real important. I found proprioception, knowing where things were, was real important. And I did a lot of symmetry exercises to achieve that. I also did symmetry standing in front of the mirror where I'd start with my feet. I'd put my feet the right distance apart, put my knees above them, put my hips there, make sure my hips were were straight. Make sure my chest was straight. Look at my shoulders. Look at my head, because I always got to do that. When if I do proprioception on my head, this is dangerous, Ralph. Why are you doing this live? Okay, so if I do proprioception on my head, like where's center, I'll come up like that, and I need to do that. That was worse than normal. Normally I come up about there, and I need to do that. So I practiced that. Obviously not enough, hey? In front of the mirror for a while. Actually, I got to where I could do it. And like anything else, it's kind of a use it or lose it thing. Gosh, I'm much better at it than I was, when I started still. I don't do it and I haven't done it in years. But when you practice something every day, you get really good at it. And when you stop doing it, you lose a little bit of it. So I've lost a little bit in the sense that I come up there and I should come up there. Um, it's funny because I know it, and I can come up and do that and then push toward anyway. So I found symmetry and proprioception real good. I figured I wanted my left side, I'm left affected. I wanted my left side to be able to do what my right side could do. So what are some things we haven't talked about? Okay, yeah. One of the first things I did was I noticed that when I walked, my left arm was still bent. It wasn't, doing the whole posture thing. It wasn't scarecrowing. Some people scarecrow. I don't make these terms up, Billy. Somebody once used it. I liked it. Scarecrowing, you've seen it. That shoulder comes up and the arm, it looks like the board's going out here on the shirt and then there's nothing in the forearm. Some people scarecrow, some people posture. This is the pattern that the stroke wants to do to you. It's going to put that elbow right against your body, the whole thing against your body, partially clenched fist. If you ignore this, I've seen a picture that I would not want to show to you because it's scary. Actually, I saw a picture of somebody who was in an insane asylum or something where they ignored it and everyone around them ignored it. And it keeps creeping up and creeping up. A physical therapist friend of mine said he saw somebody who basically their elbow was at their ear.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so early on in my recovery, not being a PT, maybe I discussed it with a PT. I don't remember. Probably not. Wasn't afraid to set off on my own, and you shouldn't be either. Assuming that you do a couple of things. Don't ever do anything that causes you pain, and don't do anything that compromises your safety. Because no exercise is worth getting hurt. Getting hurt, well, first of all, you can get hurt. But second of all, the thing that you hurt the most is your confidence. You fall and nothing happens, but 6 months later, you still got this fear. You still remember that fall. So I'm a big, big, big believer in safety. So one of the things that I did was anytime something wasn't right, like a bent arm or something, if I had a posturing arm, what I'd recommend to people is as long as you don't have any pain, try and break that pattern. I did this with physical therapists. We did bicycling, we did laying on the back and pushing up. We did several things that break. We also did with legs that break that downward toe, heel up in the air, stroke pattern. So in my recovery, anytime something wouldn't do what the other side would do, I'd move it back out. So if I had a postured arm, I'd be working on moving it out and moving it down and getting it to hang. Where spasticity is the problem there, it's like that because your brain's sending too many signals to those muscles and they won't turn off. Um, Spasticity is a big, long topic we've talked about before and we'll talk about again uh, because it comes up a lot. So I always worked against anything that wasn't working right. Uh, Elbow straightening. My elbow wouldn't straighten, so I would straighten it. And how do you do that? Well, first thing you can do is, like on the edge of the couch or something. Well, maybe I can show it on this table. You can put it down on the table somewhere where you can put your elbow down on like the edge of it, the end of a chair or sofa arm works great because you put your elbow right at the end, and so that'll support your arm, and then you can move it down or you can let it hang. You actually get a kind of a passive stretch if you support that elbow and just let the weight of your hand open up your elbow. However, in my experience and with myself and wandering around helping other folks is that passive stretch is something that's going to work more towards the end. I mean, I've seen people that had elbow, like that, and was about all we could do to straighten it out part way. Again, like with the shoulder, pushing it up. If it hurts, don't do it. But the way to get it to move is to just push into that pain just the teeniest bit and keep working it. My experience with myself and all the other people I've worked with is that pain zone will move. How do I know? Two ways. I ask them. Every time I lifted that Chris's arm and let go, I'd move it up. Does that hurt? Does that hurt? Does that hurt yet? Hurt yet? When he started to say so, I'd stop. The other thing that I learned, I don't know if this is any value to anybody, but I learned with everybody I'm working with, when I had any question about pain, I'd stare right into their eyes. Why? Because the eyes don't lie. They can tell you that doesn't hurt, and I could look and see it in their eyes that, I don't know, there's something, you can't hide it. The eyes don't lie. So uh, I was always very careful about pain, particularly with the other people. With myself, I was, because it was easy. I could feel it. But when you're moving somebody else's arm, you want a lot of feedback from them. So when I was doing that kind of thing with somebody, I would be surprise, surprise, talking constantly. Um, asking them if it hurt. Is that okay? And hold it, hold it, hold it. The way your brain makes the blueprint, I know I'm jumping all around here, but this way, um, when your brain makes a blueprint, why would you say hold it, hold it, hold it? Because when your brain makes a blueprint, the more sensory input you get all goes into that. So I found sometimes, like when I was first doing heel raises, I'd say out loud to myself, push with that left, push with that left. Because I did that to myself when I showed up at other people's houses, do counter exercises with them and stuff, whether they were right or left. I mean, of course, if they were right, I would say push with that right. But I found that two things that did, it's kind of part of the whole coaching thing. It's encouraging. And the other thing is there's something about adding audio to it scientifically, helps with that blueprint. So let's see, what else have we got here that we didn't cover? Oh, core. So, oh yeah, uh, two things I'll tell you. One is normal progression. What it says in the book, Billy, is that Billy was talking about therapists just get out the book on you sometimes. What it says in the book is that your shoulder comes back first, and then your arm and elbow, and then your wrist, and your hand comes back last. Well, I'm sitting there, a month or so out, and I'm starting to move my fingers, and they're starting to move. I got nothing in my shoulder. I can flip my wrist over on my lap. I'm moving a little bit here. I'm bending my elbow some. It's not all the way straight yet. And yeah, that's my affected arm. I got full straight up 180, same as this side. Um, but it took a while. You know what took the longest? The last 10 degrees. And you know what else? I've seen several people who got to the instead of, okay, which way is it, Ralph? Instead of all the way straight, they got to about here. And couldn't get that last 10. I don't know if they did enough of what I told them or not. I'm not anybody's mother. If you want to get better, you do the stuff I tell you. If you don't, you don't. I'm not, you know, I'm not going to police anybody. I'm a volunteer. I don't find that enjoyable at all. So I'm sitting here and my hand's starting to work, and they'll tell you that there's this normal progression. One time when I was doing a similar talk on shoulders and such for Halifax Health, I coined something that I've used ever since, and that is work what works. I said, well, I'm not going to. I actually saw somebody in one of the groups say, my hand's starting to work, but it's supposed to work shoulder, arm, wrist, hand. So I'm going to wait on moving my hand until my shoulder comes back. And I went in and said, no, 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 don't do that. Anytime you have any movement anywhere in your body, work it, especially if it's voluntary. So I continued to work the hand. I worked on the shoulder every day. I walked every other hour and I did shoulder and hand every other hour. So I did 5 times a day for 45, 50 minutes on my shoulder. Well, I split it. I'd do 3 times a day my shoulder and 3 times a day my hand. That's 45 minutes each. So that's, over 2 hours I spent every day on my shoulder. I also spent over 2 hours on my hand. So work what works. Don't go by the book. Every stroke is different. Every recovery is different. I just think it'd be foolish. And of course, it was hard for me to write a response to him because I wanted him to get it. And when somebody's already thinking like, well, I'll just follow the book, it's hard for them to get it. And you got to be real careful not to say, I'm thinking about the Dan Aykroyd's line to Jane Curtin on the nightly news. I won't say that. You can't say, oh, no, 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 don't do that. Because people tune you out as soon as they hear, no, 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 don't do that. So you have to, it's interesting because I've had to learn how to do this. You have to kind of deliver the message in a way it will be accepted if you want to actually help somebody. Because if you say, no, 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 don't do that, or you idiot, or Jane, you ignorant slut, was the line from Saturday Night Live that I was thinking about. Yeah, I went ahead and said it. People have got you tuned out, you know. Totally. Billy and Winnie are apparently old enough to remember that from the first couple of seasons of Saturday Night Live. Anyway, so work what works. And doesn't mean you can't work on your shoulder. I worked on both my hand and my shoulder. I didn't follow the book. I didn't ignore the book. I just worked everything that works. It's your recovery. It's your body. The physical therapist isn't living inside you. They don't know what you feel when you try and move your arm or try and take a step. And they never will, even if they have a stroke. If they have a stroke, they'll have a better idea because they'll have a parallel comparative type experience, but you're the only one that knows what's going on in your body. So I'm a big believer in, regardless of whether we're talking about shoulders or what we're talking about, I'm a big believer in paying attention to your body. And part of the reason is that I'm over the top, intense, detail oriented, the whole thing. I pay way too much attention, or way more attention than most people do, to everything. Everything. I mean, that's why I can do video editing, because it's like doing jewelry work. That's why I used to do jewelry work. I'm off the charts and intense. But that doesn't help you with your recovery, so let's talk a little bit about core. Okay, now one thing I did was I recently posted a thing I did with a therapeutic yoga teacher who happens to also be a doctor of physical therapy. Yeah, what a 1-2 combo that was. And man, she's a friend of my daughter's. She lived in San Antonio. When I was visiting my daughter in May, I set up a private lesson, And I'll tell you what, she lived up to everything, every expectation I had, everything I ever read about her, and then a whole bunch more. Anyway, somehow or another, last night, it's funny how the universe works. I put that video up the other week. I sent it to a couple people to see if they were going to watch it. I won't tell you the results. Um, and then I posted it, made it public, and it's got quite a few views. Well, last night when I was thinking about today's talk, I was slipping through Windows. I keep about 16 or 32 tabs open at one time in my brain. Yeah, I know it chokes my computer, Billy. Um, but I've done it. I do it. I've always done it. Anyway, I was going to looking for a YouTube tab to upload a nonprofit video, and I popped on the one with Nydia, the yoga teacher. And it just happened to be queued up to the section where she got me in a child pose, and then she got me up on all fours, and then I put my toes under myself, and she had me raise my knees and be on my elbows and toes. And she talked about, I need to find out the name of this muscle group. I'm getting to core because there's a definite connection between your core and your shoulder. Your core is connected to everything, everything.